So great to see you all today. And so we covered a bunch of stuff on our first day on Tuesday, and we're going to continue the same thing today. We're going to show you some stuff. And like I mentioned before, we're going to do a few slides, but majority of this webinar in particular is going to be more of a demonstration type of stuff. So today I'm planning to demo how to fabricate a Gothic arch tracer on the computer, how to fabricate a tooth setup on the computer. And I also want to show you some stuff with models and some stuff with just a regular setup. I have kind of prepped in steps a full denture setup, analog version of that, and also show you a couple of slides, okay? So we kind of stopped on fabrication of custom trays last time, and impressions. We talked a little bit about impressions and overextension and things like this. And I want to kind of continue with that process today and talk to you about like duplicate denture or reference denture technique is what it's officially called. If you can, in Canada, a lot of times they'll call it the Winnipeg denture technique or a Winnipegger. I called it a lot of things as well. But what we basically do is if the patient presents with their own set of dentures, and that set of dentures is somewhat fitting, like it's not missing a bunch of stuff and everything else. And if the occlusion is good, we're actually halfway there. But if the occlusion is bad, we can still utilize those reference dentures in order to give the best possible outcome to the patient. Because if we don't utilize those dentures at all, and we start all the way from the beginning, we're going to take our initial impressions in alginate, that we're going to make our custom trays, take impressions there, and then make wax rims and everything else. That takes quite a bit of time. And one of the important things that I've often seen, sorry, can't speak English all of a sudden this morning, is that the older the patient is, the less likely they are to get used to something new. So if they have a set of dentures that they like, but the teeth are worn out, but they like the adaptation of those dentures somewhat, you can maybe do a relight on those dentures and they'll still utilize them. But if you start all the way from the beginning, chances are you're going to run into some issues. So generally what I do is I will take a set of dentures, and back in the day I would just duplicate them in analog, but nowadays I'll just do a 360-degree scan of the denture and I'll print it. Once those dentures are printed, so they kind of look like this. This one actually has a cutback on it, but the idea is the same. I will utilize that to take some impressions. Now, you see how this is aligned on the build platform where the supports are on the intaglio surface. And the reason why that is because we're going to be relining that anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect to me. I'm more worried about the actual occlusion. If the patient's occlusion was good, I want to keep that and use that reference denture to take the impression and also take the bite. I hope that makes sense, guys. Okay? And one of my favorite methods of taking the impression is utilizing some type of tissue conditioner. Now, the HydroCast is no longer being manufactured, but Linol and Co-Comforter still are, and there's a plethora of other ones. I personally actually use the Henry Schein brand tissue conditioner because it's fairly inexpensive, but it has worked fairly well for me over the years. And basically what we do is this is kind of on, this is shown on a regular denture, not a printed one, but the idea is the same. You apply right away apply the tissue conditioner, or you can apply some kind of impression material to check for the areas that are overextended. Then you just adjust those areas and then reapply tissue conditioner for that patient and have them wear that for at least 24 to 48 hours. The great thing about tissue conditioners, they have a mechanism that sets up in 10 minutes and also in 24 hours. So it kind of gels up in 10 minutes and the patient can wear it fairly easily. But if you have the patient wear it for 24 hours, they will actually border mold the case for you and get a really nice impression, as you can see here. Once you do that, then you can just pour up your models. And if you have a bite, you can just mount everything up with a bite and then go straight from there to setup. Now, if you can't do that, if your occlusion's messed up, you can at least box everything up, pour up the models, and create some wax rims. Okay, or there's some other options you can go with. Okay, if your dentures are deficient, for example, you got deficiency in parameters, the retromolar pads are missing. Oftentimes I see on lower dentures missing retromolar pad areas. And in my opinion, the reason for that is when the initial impression was done, it wasn't done properly. The retromolar pads weren't impressed properly, for example. And then the custom tray didn't have that done, or there was no custom tray to begin with. And the denture was deficient, like half of the denture is there. So in order to fix that, there are some options you can do. What I basically will do is I'll take the reference denture that I've printed, and I've done it with impression compound, like I showed you last time, to extend those areas. But that doesn't always work as well, in my opinion, because it's a little bit brittle. And if you have to transform that and to the lab, and you're not pouring it up in the office, that might fracture off. Okay, because it's just a kind of free. There's like a free area that's suspended, that's barely attached to the denture, and there's some risk involved in that, in my opinion. I started using this material right here. These are thermoplastic beads that I showed you guys last time. I just buy these from online. There are many different manufacturers of this stuff. I think the most common one is TAK, T-A-K, and you can look up, and it comes in beads, and it also comes in sticks. So you can actually use it as like almost like a thermoplastic impression compound from Kerr. So it's similar to that, but it's this material. And what I like about the beads is they have some flexibility. So if you're transporting the case, it won't get damaged as much. So it kind of looks like this. Okay. So this is one of the cases that I was working with, and this particular patient had zero suction on anything. And the second I added those areas to it, this is what it ended up looking like. So just by adding those areas to it, we ended up with suction. So it's important to understand those things. Now, once you've captured all those areas, you need to properly, once you've done the extensions and once you've done the wash impressions, you need to properly box up and properly fabricate a model, okay? And with models, there's certain things you have to look for. Like this is also actually an Algin. You can do that with Algin and polyvinyl. So that's what I generally do in the lab as well, okay? So you need to make sure you have a nice landing area on things. You need to make sure that from that landing area, you have that depth of the vestibule that's going to be present in there. You need to make sure when you pour up your cast, it's got, well, this says 15, but you want to have at least 10 millimeters on there, okay? And you want to have some area behind the posterior palatal seal on the model as well, so you can easily see where things are starting and ending. And also when you're flasking things, you're not sitting right on top of that posterior palatal seal area. Here it says it needs to be 8 millimeters. I think it's 3 or 4 millimeters is sufficient. You just want to have some area behind that so you can utilize it. And you want to make sure to carve in your posterior palatal seal. The idea here is the clinician should be the one marking it for you. However, I rarely see that happening, unfortunately. So you want to find out the anatomical landmarks of how to carve posterior palatal seal areas. And this is what I usually do. Usually my post-dam goes about 2 millimeters past the fovea palatini, and it goes right up to the hamular notch. And the depth of it, it kind of shallows out closer to this edge and this edge, but the depth of it is about a millimeter, sometimes millimeter and a half. You don't want to go deeper than that because you actually will do more harm than good when you do that kind of stuff, okay? And from there, once you have the models fabricated, you will be able to fabricate your wax rims. Now, let me switch on my camera. That's not on my face, but on my table, so I can show you guys how I basically will box up my impressions. So basically what I do is I utilize magnetic boxing strips. Grab this one here. So you can buy a roll of this magnetic tape. This is actually a tape that's made for dry erase writing. Okay, and they come in a 2-inch and a 3-inch. This one is a 2-inch. I also have the 3-inch one. Sometimes I need to utilize that, but most of the time the 2-inch will work pretty well. The downside is this stuff, it's magnetic, but it's not very strong magnet, so it will come apart fairly easily. This is where one of these clips come in. Okay, so what I'll basically will do is I'll actually measure up about the area like this around my impression, and now I lock it in place with one of these clips. Okay, so I have my boxing up here. Now, one of the other problems with this method is that you will have a little bit more access on the back, so you're going to be wasting a little bit of stone. Some people will put like a little piece of plastic in the back, so they don't do that. I don't do that because the stone is not that greatly expensive, and I'm not a production lab where I'm doing a ton of models. So the amount of waste of stone that I produce is not really that important to me. So I generally don't worry about that kind of stuff. Now, the material that I utilize to box up, I've used R-time dough before. I haven't been able to find that material in white, so I just buy this stuff called dazzling dough. It's all pretty much the same material. It's kind of like Play-Doh, and it's nice and soft. And here I got a brand new box because the one I'm actually using in the lab's got a bunch of stone in it and little pieces of polyvinyl and everything else, because this stuff is reusable, right? And it's not that expensive. I think it's like 12, 13, 15 bucks. I can't remember, for a tub of 3 pounds. So it doesn't have any dental tax on it, so it's not that expensive. And basically what I'll do is I'll take a bunch of this material and I'll kind of push it. Well, actually, no, I'm lying. I'll take one of these first. Just one of these sheets that you use in vacuum forming sheets. Or you can use a piece of tile, whatever you want to do. And I'll put that in there. Okay. And the idea is a lot of custom trays will have handles going up and down, but some of them will have going that direction. And I will just cut that handle off just because I have a good relationship with my doctors and they know I do that. But if your doctors don't want you touching their custom trays, you can put actually a hole through one of these things and be okay with it. And then what I basically will do is I'll just kind of push it into that putty. Now, be careful. If it's well supported and you push it, it won't deform your impression at all. But if it doesn't have good support, what I will basically do is I'll just kind of put it on there and I'll just add material to the side so I'm not distorting anything. And what you basically do is you just kind of push stuff around and add where you need to add, and you kind of box things up. Now, because I've been doing this for a while, I know how much material to add to things, and I know where to stop to do things. When I was first starting to do it, or when I train people how to do it properly, what I'll basically will do is I'll take the impression, grab another one so I can show you guys. I'll take an impression and I'll take a magic marker and I'll mark it with a magic marker, with a Sharpie, magic marker, whatever you want to call it. I'll mark how much I want stone to go up on this impression, okay? And that way we'll have a proper landing area and proper depth of the sulcus without creating any issues down the line, okay? The good thing about this particular method is what it does, it creates a nice landing area for you, number one. Number two, your base, you know exactly how tall your base is going to be. You can measure that. So you know that's going to be at least that 10 millimeters that we talked about. And when you're mixing stone, you don't have to have a lot of training to get that done properly. Basically what I do is I measure out my stone and measure out my powder, and I always add my stone to my powder, mix it, and then I add it to my vacuum mixer. It mixes it up for me, and then I add a little bit at a time until things are full to the brim where they need to be, or lower than brim, depending on how you box it up. And any kind of discrepancy, like if there's an air bubble or there's like maybe a little bit too much moisture, all of that will go up instead of going down. And if you have any kind of areas that are not precise, they're going to be on the base. but everything that needs to be precise is going to be on the intaglio surface of the actual model. So that makes it a lot better and makes it a lot easier. And you saw how fast I boxed that up. It doesn't take a lot of time at all to box up an impression. If you are trying to do this the way that we're taught in school, either dental tech school or denture school or dental school, whatever you guys are going to, you're going to be utilizing, oh boy, you're going to be utilizing boxing wax, you're going to be utilizing rump wax and things like this, and it just, it's a nightmare, to be honest with you guys. Okay, but once you've created your model, once you've trimmed up your model, it's important to create a good base plate, right? Because we're going to be making our wax rims and our base plates. And one thing I wanted to mention, let me take these gloves off, I don't need them anymore. Whenever you're printing your base plates, if you're not doing them, I haven't done base plates by hand in a couple of years, and custom trays, and I have been so happy. Because what usually happens when I do things like this is that when I did it by hand, I always put either too little or too much block out, and then my base plates would either fall off the model or I couldn't get them off the model, and I would break. If I was lucky, I would break the base plate. If I wasn't lucky, I would break the model. So there was too much risk involved. This was actually one of the first things I switched to digitally, was that and duplicate dentures. But the thing that I've noticed over the years, when you're printing your base plates, especially the upper, that's why I have the upper one here, you want to make sure that your posterior palatal seal area is away from the build plate. So the build plate is right on top of this, and this is printing away from it. And the reason for that, and I found out the hard way, if you do it the other way around, you're going to get distortion in this area, and you don't have as good of an adaptation to the model, and the same way intraorally to the posterior palatal seal area, and the thing drops out of the sky. So this method works a lot better for those things, guys. Okay. Now, once you build and print the build plates, oh, one thing I wanted to show you also. Okay, I generally will go over the vestibule pretty deep in there, and it kind of looks kind of bulky right here. So once it's printed, I will actually trim all this off so it fits the model a lot better. Okay. Now from here, we're gonna need to add wax to our base plates. And this slide has been around the internet a few times. It's one I've done many, many years ago. You can see these actually are still done by hand. But the idea is you want to do 22 millimeters on the interior of the maxilla, 18 millimeters on the interior of the mandible, and do about 80 degrees here. I've done it 80, I've done it 90. Ideally, you want to do 80. The reason for that is because you want to provide proper lip support, as you can see right here. But we've done it both ways because usually what happens, it's a little bit too forward anyways, and you have to kind of adjust the facial aspect of the wax rim. And when you do that, you just do it at an angle, and then you create a good lip support that way. Okay. One of the things you can also utilize in order to give yourself a good advantage of the height is to use one of these Alma gauges. Oh no, that's not an Alma gauge. Alma gauge is something else. This is, what is it called? I forgot the name of this ruler. Sorry. But the way it works is that you place this portion of the incisive papilla, and this portion shows you where the lip is, and you just add a couple of millimeters to that, and you know how tall to make your wax rim. Okay, so you don't make it overly tall or overly short. It's a great tool, but we don't often utilize it. I don't even remember the name of this tool. And also be aware how much tooth is showing on patients. Like if it's an older patient, they're going to be showing less tooth versus a younger patient. Now, females show a little bit more tooth than a male, but these are just kind of a guideline, guys, because it doesn't always happen to be the same exact thing, because some males show more teeth than some females. Some older patients want to have a youthful smile. So you want to be able to accommodate your individual patients rather than just going and using a cookie cutter technique. Okay, hope it makes sense. Okay, this is an Alma gauge. So an Alma gauge allows you to measure a vertical and horizontal distance from incisive papilla to the incisal edge of the teeth. So this one will tell you vertically that from the incisive papilla to the incisal edge of this denture, we're at 11 millimeters. And we also know there's another ruler right here. We also know that it's about, what, 9 millimeters to the facial of the middle of the incisive papilla here. Now, this method is not often utilized, but I have had to use it once or twice actually recently, because we made a denture for a patient, and a denture was, patient really loved it. The only issue was over time the patient lost bone and the denture needed to be relined. And when they did the reline, either the patient didn't bite down on the denture properly, or the clinician was just holding the denture in place with their fingers, and that messed up the bite quite a bit, to the point where the denture was no longer salvageable. But the position of the teeth was still the same in relation to the incisive papilla. So when we did a new setup, or when we were doing the wax rim, what I should have done actually was measure the relationship of the wax rim in relation to the old denture when it came to the incisive papilla and the incisal edges vertically and horizontally. And I did not do that. So when we did the try-in, even though with the wax rim things looked pretty well, it looked like the teeth were a bit too long. So when I compared that setup with the old setup, I realized it was too long by 2.5 millimeters. So by using this instrument. Now, if you don't want to buy one of these, you can buy one of these calipers that are like $6-10, and then do what I did. I actually created this file, and it's pretty much does the same thing. So this ruler will show you the horizontal position in relation to the incisive papilla, and this will show you the vertical. You just place it on the denture, okay? So it's one of those things you can utilize, kind of like this, okay? So we know same thing, 9 millimeters anterior, and this one actually was 14 millimeters, a little too tall, okay? Now, when you're fabricating your wax rims, it's just the basic stuff, guys, knowing that from the middle of the incisal edge to the facial, it needs to be about 7 to 9 millimeters. I usually will do 9 or even 10, and we'll just cut it back where we need to. The posterior width needs to be about 8 to 10 millimeters. On the lower, same thing, 8 to 10 millimeters in the posterior. And the anterior, you want the wax rim to be 5 to 8 millimeters. I like using these yellow wax rims from Gebdi. I buy them from a friend of mine in Connecticut. He ships them from Germany, so they're not cheap, but I really like this wax because it's very hard, it carves well, and it has a vanilla smell, so it's just added benefits to it. But when you are doing your wax rims, guys, this is a great instrument, okay? And I recommend it for clinicians and for technicians. Basically, this ledge goes onto the back of the base plate or the back of the model, depending on the height of the ledge, actually. And you place it right there, and you don't slide it back and forth. I'm actually going to show you here in a second. But you actually melt downward in order to get things done. And on the lower, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't often have to do the lower one, because usually when I've kind of built everything, it lines up pretty well because I have good areas that I can see. But if you need to adjust it, you just reverse it and do it this way, okay? Let me switch my camera on so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So I got a case here. I actually showed you this on Tuesday, right? This is the one with the like really severely resorbed ridge. And I've built the maxillary and mandibular wax rims from that. And you could see how well the posterior is adapted to this model, right? And you'll see that right away. That's how I can always tell when people print stuff and they don't fit them onto models. I know they don't fit them on the models because I'll see the print is being reversed to what I usually printed, and I know for the fact it's not going to have the same adaptation, unless you have like a ton of supports holding everything in place and not allowing it to warp. Okay, so basically for the maxilla, I'm around 22, 23 millimeters from here already. So all I have to do is I need to actually melt and make sure that I'm within the camper's plane and the posterior, okay? Used to be in the old days, it would measure like 22 here, it would measure 18 here. But now what I basically will do is I'll just heat that up, and when I go down to get to that point, it will actually be within the camper's plane. It's based on the hip plane, so the distance to the incisal edge from the incisal papilla is usually around 6 or 7 millimeters. Okay, and distance from here to here is usually also 6 to 7 millimeters. So by doing it here, this direction, we're mimicking the hip plane, which oftentimes is parallel to the camper's plane. But this is an approximation. You're going to have to verify this intraorally to make sure that you are within the camper's plane by using a Fox plane to get this done. So basically what I'll just do is I'll just heat this up with a torch. I got this my nice, very professional looking bowl here that I just melted a bunch of notches in it because I like to keep mine in there so it doesn't get all over the place. And basically I just heat up. This is made out of aluminum. So it heats up pretty easily. And what you basically will do is you'll just place that in the handler notch area and you'll just go down. You see I'm not sliding this, I'm just pushing on it. And once I get to where the height that I need, I'll just slide back and I'm done, okay? And then we can put that back on there and go that way. So on the lower, we'll do the similar thing. I made this a little taller so I can show you guys. I got hot wax all over my fingers. So about 3/4 up the retromolar pad, and then we slide back, okay? So that's the height that we're going to use. And then all you have to do is place it back on the model. Now, when you get the little ripples like this, you can just take a spatula and scrape them off later, or you can just leave them as is. They don't really affect things too much. And that's how you pretty much melt the wax for retromolar, for wax rims. Now, let's say, for example, we have a situation like this, right, where we're going to need to take a wash impression. If you can measure things pretty close, good. You just tell the doctor, you know what, we're going to take our bite registration with this. Once the bite registration has been taken, we'll do a try-in. And the reason why we do the try-in first, because if we do a wash impression here before the try-in, we're going to have to pour up a whole new model, which we'll have to do anyways, but we'll have to make a whole new base plate to fit that model and then set teeth on top of that, which creates a little bit too much work in my opinion. So I recommend doing the wash impressions after we do the try-in stage, okay? And this is what actually is shown on these slides right here. So we have some impressions that are overextended. And I basically, as you can see here, I just trimmed it back more and then made some wax rims and told them to send these things to me. And once we do a try-in, we'll do a wash impression. Now, if you do this kind of stuff and the bite is done and we did the try-in, and I'm going to show you the try-in stuff here also, and the bite's all over the place and we can't get things figured out. A Gothic arch tracer, guys, something like this, it's a really good way of lining things up and getting the good results that you need. And I have been utilizing it in a couple of different ways. Initially, I started doing where I would buy the kits, which are not cheap, right? So they're like $100 a kit, and you can only use it on 1 or 2 patients at a time. And then I designed the digital one where I was still using the metal screw. And then my buddy Mark gave me a file for a screw that you could actually print. So nowadays, we will make base plates and wax rims. And at the same time, we'll also make something like this. But if we already have a try-in, that we don't need the base plates, right? Here, I was still including the metal ones in there because sometimes things don't line up properly, especially if you're not provided a bite. So with, what I want to show you guys, where is it? So a lot of times, if we want to do a Gothic arch tracer right straight from the beginning, which is a great way of doing things, and not do a try-in first and see how it works out, creating something like this, using something like this, which is a centric tray, which is virtually just a mush bite. This will allow you to align your models in a proper orientation, so when you're making a tracer, things will go a lot smoother, okay? And basically, guys, this is what it looks like intraorally. This is me still using the using the metal pin. But the upper wax trim was used first to determine the height and the aesthetics and phonetics for the patient. Phonetics not as much, but more of the height of things. And also the lower was used to determine the vertical dimension. And then we would take those out, put those in. They're cross-mountable with wax rims, and then we adjust the screw to the proper vertical dimension that we have established with wax rims. And then it would look something like this. This is a little close here, but still works. And then intraorally, we would actually do a tracing to establish the little arrow, and the tip of that arrow would be the centric relation. Now we would either drill a hole through the base plate a little bit so we can indent it, or we could put a little washer on top of it with wax and hold that in place. That way the vertical dimension won't change. So if you're actually going to be drilling a hole, you want to increase your vertical dimension of occlusion increase it by about a millimeter and a half. So when you do the hole, it will go back into the actual vertical dimension that you need. Okay. And we do that for a couple of different ways. We do it for wax rim cases, and we also actually do it for the reference denture technique. So let's say, for example, we got a case something like this, right? Where the patient comes in, they have a set of dentures, they like the adaptation, everything is great, but then we start getting into situations where, you know what, we need to do a setup based on the actual dentures. Well, you see there's been a wash impression done, we've mounted everything, we took a bite, but if I will take this bite and I'll make the denture to that bite with new posterior occlusion, over time this patient will realize, oh, you know what, I have posterior teeth, and they'll start relaxing and they'll start deprogramming themselves, and all of a sudden you end up with something like this, an anterior open bite. I call it an alligator bite. Okay, so in order to avoid that, what I did here is I did the anterior setup, I cut all the posterior teeth down, and I made a Gothic arch tracer. That way we could check the aesthetics of the maxilla. We can't check phonetics because that little tracing plate's on there, but then we can actually get the centric relation and do a proper setup for this patient. Now, there are a couple of different techniques out there where we're trying to deprogram the patient. I've done one case with this from Dr. Abe's book, where you do like ramps out of like soft acrylic, and I've had patient deprogram and wear that in. Nowadays, guys, what I basically will do is I'll just print a duplicate denture, give that to the patient, and we'll adjust it to where the patient's comfortable, and then we will do our setup based on that. Okay, hope it makes sense. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to show you, like if you want to do a wash impression on the lower, you're gonna have to do something like this, where you're gonna snap this in and out to get things done, guys. Okay, so from here, once we got everything mounted, we will actually have to do a setup. Now, in order to do a proper setup, you guys need to have an understanding of what model analysis is and what it looks like. And what I have done in previous webinars, I went step by step, showing you every single thing that you need to utilize in order to do proper model analysis. Now, we don't have a lot of time here today, and I don't want to go through all those steps here. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more in depth about model analysis, please look at my previous webinar, and it's going to show you the things that I usually utilize in order to do that. But the idea is to use anatomical landmarks in order to properly align things when it comes to occlusion, and maybe possibly avoid having a crossbite. So the red lines is the ideal position if we're using lingualized occlusion, like I usually do. The red lines are for creating ideal position for central fossa of your lower teeth, starting from the second premolar, and ideal position for the palatal cusps, starting from the second premolar for the maxillary teeth. Okay, the blue lines are how far you can move those same landmarks buccally, and the green lines are how far you can move those lines palatally or lingually. Okay, and by doing that, you oftentimes are able to move things around and reduce the possibility of the crossbite. Okay. Now, if I switch my camera on, I want to show you something else. So we've done this. I just need to box it up and send it back to my doctors. Now we have two different models here, right? I got one where I dropped a bunch of pens down. I got one, I don't know if you can see this very well, but the ridge here, it's got some width to it, right? And I got another one where the ridge doesn't have a lot of width to it. So when you have a knife edge ridge, or even smaller than this, doing model analysis is not going to give you very different results, because if you move stuff buccally by 0.5 millimeter or lingually by 0.5 millimeter, it's not really going to change your cross bite options. But if you have a wider ridge, then yeah, moving things 2-3 millimeters one way or the other can possibly fix those things for you. And also, model analysis is a good option to see, like, how far in can I move those teeth? Because if I move them too far, well, first of all, I'm going to have a destabilized denture, and second of all, I'm going to crowd the tongue space, which can cause issues like tongue biting also. Okay, same thing buccally. You know, how far buccally I can move stuff on the maxilla or the mandible. Like, am I going to be too far out to be destabilized, or I'm going to be doing some cheek biting, stuff like that. So it's important to understand those things and those aspects in order to get the best possible result, guys. Okay. Let's minimize this and go back to this. So, guys, when it comes to occlusion, there's many different combinations and many different occlusion types out there. My favorite one is lingualized occlusion. I generally, rarely use semi-anatomic occlusion, almost never anatomic. Flat plane, not my cup of tea. I'll be honest with you, because even though there are books out there and they talk about it and everything else, when it comes to efficiency, it just does not have any. Okay, people have a really, really difficult time chewing with flat teeth. You know, people don't generally chew like this. They're not cows. So there's a combination where you can use a flat plane lower with the lingualized upper, and I've done that once before where the patient's bite was like all over the place, and I just could not get it stabilized at all. And this was before I knew about like duplicate denture techniques and utilizing that Dr. Abi's option to do things. So we basically gave him cusp teeth on the maxilla and flat plane on the lower. This, at least this way, we'll have like some cutting going on there. But majority of the time, we'll use something like this, guys. And there's two types of, well, actually, there's two types of lingualized occlusion. There's Gerber lingualized, where the anterior, not anterior, but where the first premolar is reversed, but the rest is going to be parallel cusp, central fossa. But majority of the time, I will be using just regular lingualized, where it's the same relationship with the first premolar, second premolar, molar, and second molar. Now, it's important to understand the overbite and overjet things for dentures. Dentures are not the same thing as crown and bridge, guys. Where in crown and bridge, you can build in nice anterior coupling and things are great, nothing's going to happen. When you build in anterior coupling, it's just in my opinion, for dentures, you're going to run into situations where you're going to put too much force on the anterior maxilla and cause resorption of that anterior maxilla. And also, acrylic teeth or ceramic filled teeth are not meant to withstand high lateral forces. So they will often break and they will often chip. Okay. So if you look right here, for example, you could see that chipping of the canine here and the lateral here, simply because the posterior teeth have worn down and we had a lot of occlusal coupling on those teeth, and those lateral forces were too much, and it was breaking those things way too much. And also, oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I have to slide back. Sorry. So on this denture, you can see how like we're really soft teeth here, so they didn't fracture, but they wore out. But you could see when we did the reline how much bone loss there was in the interior region. And this is the mandible. Maxilla is even worse because it's a softer type of bone. Okay, so Those are the things you have to look out for and make sure things are done properly. Okay, so what I want to show you when it comes to occlusion, how I set things up in analog to make sure things are working out well and everything else. And I'm going to go quickly with that because I want to show you a bunch of stuff on the computer, and we're like 45 minutes left. And I know me, I talk either way too slow or way too fast, and I might end up with problematic things here. So in the analog, I got my really cool articulator here. I don't generally set up on this type of articulators, I'll be honest with you. I use the Stratus. In my opinion, Stratus is like the best thing for removable dentures. But the idea is, the reason I'm using this one is because it's just a lot easier to show on the on video when things are done. So basically what I'll do is I'll set up my anterior teeth first and my first premolars on the maxilla. That's what I do first. I usually have it set up on the table on my flat plane so I can set it up a lot easier. Okay. Once I do that, I will start setting up my lower anteriors like this. This wax is cracking because these base plates are not made from dental material and they've worked over time. And I'll set up my lower anteriors and I will set up my first premolars. And the reason I do that is because it allows me to actually create my plane of occlusion on the mandible. Okay, the over jet on the lowers is set properly, but over bite will be adjusted down the line, guys, because I adjust to over bite once all the teeth are set and we're actually moving stuff in order to properly align them. Okay, once I've set up this, what I'll do is I'll set up the rest of the lowers. Please don't break on me. There we go. So my setup will look like this, guys. Okay, so all the lower teeth are set up. This is actually not correct because you see how it's going above things, but the idea is it should be going a little bit lower here. Okay, once we do that, then we'll set up the upper posteriors. Now, what I generally will do is I'll set up my first molar first, and then once I do that, I'll set up my second bicuspid. The reason for that, because this occlusion is very important for function. And my second premolar, if I adjust the distal of my second premolar, it will still have really good function. And because it's a distal of the second premolar, it's not going to affect my aesthetics as much. Okay. So once I do that, from that point, I will actually set my posterior teeth. And once I've done that, I'll start adjusting my lowers in order to give me proper support. Now, what I'll basically will do, these are actually mounted on a different articulator. What I'll basically do is I'll adjust the protrusive contact to the point where I don't do bilateral balanced occlusion, I do tripodized occlusion. Basically what I'll do is in protrusive, I want to make sure my anterior teeth are touching and my posterior teeth are touching at the same time. And in my lateral movements, I want to be able to have a nice sliding contact like this onto my working and my balancing side as well. Okay, so that's with lingualized occlusion, guys. Now, if we do semi-anatomic occlusion, that's what I have set up here. So the teeth that I use almost exclusively, guys, are going to be my VITA Classical teeth with linguiform posteriors. Okay, rarely I will use physiodents like they're here when I want to do semi-anatomic occlusion. But I've done this maybe once or twice. Majority of the time I'll use VITA Classicals and I will use linguiform posteriors. If I'm doing an economy case, I'll use MFTs. What I like about MFTs, you can use them in semi-anatomic and you can do them with also lingualized. Actually, most semi-anatomic teeth can be set as lingualized occlusion. All you have to do is just kind of rotate it outward slightly and just have the palatal contact instead of a ABC buccal and palatal contacts. Okay. But the same thing, what I'm looking for a sliding contact in my working and in my balancing, as you can see right here. And in protrusive, I'm looking for tripodized contact. So I got a sliding touching in the front, slightly touching in the front, and I'm touching in the back at the same time. So these are the things that I look for in my contacts going forward. So that's how I set up my teeth. What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm actually going to log off this computer for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to log in on a different computer, which is right next to me. And the reason for that is because the 3Shape and Mesh Mixer is a little laggy on this one when I'm running the camera and everything else. And on that other one, it's a slightly newer computer, so it actually will work a little bit better. So give me a second. Let me log out and log back in. Hopefully everything will work well, and I'll see you guys in a couple of minutes.
All right, everybody. While he does that, again, if you have any questions, go ahead and send them into the question box on the upper right-hand corner of your panel. And we are recording this. Give us a couple days to edit it, take out like this in between part and so forth. And I will now see if I can bring Eugene back in. And there is Eugene
All right,
again.
can you see me and hear me?
I can see you.
Okay, I think you're muted, Jim, because I can't hear you. Or maybe I have my sound turned off. Let me check.
Okay, you're the presenter.
Screen one. I think it's this one.
I see you.
Let me see if I'm sharing this screen or not. Yep, I am sharing the screen.
screen.
Hold on, I think I might have my, I can't hear you very well. I can't hear you at all, actually. I think I don't have my, how do I change?
Can you hear me now?
Audio computer, microphone, speakers. There we go. All right,
All
think I can hear you now. Excellent.
Okay, great. I can see your screen, and
Okay,
I think we're ready.
We are excellent. We're ready. That worked out really well. Awesome. I'm super happy about it. So I showed you on the slides how to fabricate a Gothic arch tracer, but I want to show you how to do it on the computer, how I usually do it. So basically what I do first is in 3Shape, I will basically create a base plate. I showed you the steps to create a custom tray, but the base plate is pretty much the same thing. You want to make sure you use model material here. I'm going to press OK. And we're going to, oops, this one. And we're going to import the scan for our upper jaw. Okay. We're going to design our base plate. And remember, I told you guys, when it comes to base plates, you want to make sure that you have a lot more of the anterior area visible, because you want to be able to insert it, not have too much lip support there. So I'll usually change the angulation like this, and I'll do a blockout angle 3 degrees and set from view. Okay. And then we're going to click next. That works out well. So it blocks out those undercuts. Click next. Check, make sure there's no errors in the file. Those little black triangles, there's nothing there. And then my base will be 2 millimeters, and the impression gap will be set at 0, because I don't want any impression gap. And usually by this point, I'll have a posterior palatal seal carved in here. I don't on this case, but it's not really important because this is a demo case. And basically, I'm just doing an outline of what my base plate will look like. Hopefully not too ugly. So pretty fast. I can go through all these steps fairly quickly without having any issues at all. I do the outline. Once it goes past 50%, it's usually indicative that it's going to render it no problems. So we're going to click next, next, and then we're going to close it. Once we close it, we're actually going to advanced and generate cam output. This is the option I couldn't get on my other computer for some reason, because I was just creating too many issues. Okay, and then the next file we're going to do the lower, and we're going to do the exact same thing on the lower. So we're going to choose custom tray. We're going to switch from zircon to model material. I'm going to press OK because I already have it scanned in. So if I don't have it scanned in, I have to press scan. But since I have the scan already, I'm going to import the lower edentulous cast because this is lower. And I'm going to right click, and actually click design. And same thing here. I don't usually adjust the path of insertion of the lower because the lip support is not really a big issue here. So I'm going to click next. And we're going to go next. Actually, I'm seeing an error right here. So I'm actually going to go back. And here I'm going to choose the smoothing option. Make it slightly smaller. I don't need a lot of wax here. And just click on that to remove that error, not arrow. Okay, so we have it blocked out this way. Same thing, we're going to give ourselves an outline for our base plate. Oops. There we go, almost there. Nice. Okay, we're going to click next. Now, the steps for the Gothic Arch Tracer, guys, are not easy. I'll be honest with you. If you don't do them very often, it might be a little complex with Mesh Mixer. But the great thing is that the files are free, and you can print it for every single patient, and you don't have to buy those kits. Okay. So if you're not comfortable with doing it this way, you can always buy a kit and then put it with wax rims together and go to town. So it works out great for that. But if you want an option like I'm showing you, which is absolutely free, that might be something you want to be looking into. Okay. So I've designed that, and I'm going to go to manufacturing. So this one's going to be my lower. This one's going to be my upper. Okay. If you see some names on this desktop, there's only going to be two names that you're going to see. It's one of them is mine, and the other one is my stepdad's. So I have permission from him to use it on here. So I'm not breaking any HIPAA laws here. I've hidden all the other files in here, so you shouldn't have any setups. You shouldn't have any names popping up here. Okay. So once you have those files created, if I open up Mesh Mixer and I bring one in, and I bring the other one in, click append because you want them to be, they're going to be in the same orientation as they are in the 3Shape. If you don't have it in the same orientation as in 3Shape, what you need to do is to go into your 3Shape dental control panel and switch off the advanced placement or whatever it's called. I can't remember exactly. So let's open it up, see if we can show you guys which option needs to be switched off. I want to show you guys my login information, but it's okay. I'll show you later. I'll put a little video on YouTube or Instagram on how to change those options. That's one thing you can do. And the second one, you can actually buy on the dongle option, export visualization output option, and then you'll be able to get things done in the same orientation. So basically, once you bring that in, they should be oriented properly. If they are not oriented properly, you can still do the plates, but it might not be as precise. So what you do is you download the files from Thingiverse and you import them into the Mesh Mixer option, and they're going to be under my parts. Okay, you can see I got all those parts in there. And the easiest way to put it in there is what you do is you take any file you brought in, and you press Control A, it lights up that file, and you go into Convert to Solid Part, and that brings it into that menu as a solid part. But we're not going to do that here, so we're just going to clear that selection. But for now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to hide the upper, and we're going to click Mesh Mix, and we're going to bring in this file right here, which is the file for the screw. And as you can see right here, I have a little leg on there. And the reason that leg is on there is because that leg is actually 18 millimeters. And the 18 millimeters is the height from the depth of the vestibule to the top of the occlusal plane usually, right? When we do our wax rims. So I can actually do that and align it to the same options. So if you could look right here, I move that forward, well, I know that this is going to be the proper height, actually a little bit lower, for what the wax rim looks like. So I can place it a little bit lower if I want to, just so I'm not interfering with anything on the maxilla. But that's going to give us that alignment, okay? And now the screw is going to be about the same area as the first molar. A lot of times you will see like a little indentation here, but here, and that's where the first molars are usually placed. But here, I'm kind of going by experience, and it's about right here. We want to make sure it's kind of centered. Okay, once we do that, I'm going to press enter, and that's the position that we're going to have for this portion right here. So we no longer need that leg, so we can actually just cut that off. We're going to go into edit, and we're going to press plane cut. Okay, I'm going to draw a line right here. Slightly lower that line. And we're going to click on this arrow because we want to erase everything below it, not above it like it's showing right here. And we're going to press accept. Okay, so now the leg is cut and this is placed right here. So the next step is to attach this piece to this piece. Now you could do that with a ball and socket like I showed you on the file, and those files are in Thingiverse as well. But I'm not planning on doing a wash impression for this particular case. Okay, so what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to go back into Mesh Mixer, and I'm going to bring in this file right here with a ball, and I'm going to align it going downward, rotate it, and bring it down. Going that direction, and align it so it touches it. Okay, so one thing you look for is you want to make sure that this is touching the top of this, but not perforating all the way down, okay? So what I'm doing, click accept, and now I'm going to attach it by using Boolean union. But actually, before I do that, so I have one mesh, and I have the second one. Okay, I'm actually going to duplicate this 2 more times, just so I don't have to bring it in. Actually, I did it too many times, okay? So we're going to attach this to this, and we're going to do Boolean union. Looks like it worked well. Usually when you see so let me turn off that option with multicolors. To change to multiple phase groups, you press the space bar, and you can change from the solid color to the multiple colors like this, or you can just keep on the solid color. I like keeping the solid color. Okay. Now we're going to use the other file, the copy of it. We're going to press T for transform. We're actually going to move that, and we're going to change to world orientation so it's a little bit more aligned. Rotate it. Now guys, it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, you're just using it for attaching. It doesn't have to be super perfect. You see how it's perforating here? That's not a good thing. So we're going to rotate it outward a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. So now it's touching everywhere, but it's not perforating. So accept. I'm going to click again. I'm going to do Boolean union. Excellent. And now the next one is we're actually going to also press T, move it to this side, rotate it a little bit like this, move it here. We've got perforation. Let's change the angle a little bit more. Okay, no perforation. We've got attachment. Excellent. Okay, press enter. Now we're going to attach each one of these legs like I did this one. Now we're going to attach this one. So we attached all those legs to this piece. I'm going to press accept. Once we do this, I'm going to cut the excess off the tops. So I'm going to line it up like this. I'm going to do plane cut. I'm going to draw a line that's parallel to the top. It's going to be erasing everything to the top. I'm going to move downward. Press accept. And now everything's cut that I don't need. Now these areas are a little rough, but I usually just polish them up once I printed it. Okay. So the top portion is, the bottom portion is done. I have no perforations. The only thing is I have to do is attach this to the base plate. So I've got base plate selected. I press shift and click on this and do Boolean union. And hopefully I didn't screw it up and these colors come up and everything gets joined together. Come on, reducing mesh. Okay, so the bottom is done. So what I have to do now is I have to work on the top. And the top plate has to be parallel to the camper's plane and parallel to this thing, right? So let's turn off the lower. And at this point, we're going to go into mesh mix. We're going to bring in the plate, which is like this. We're going to bring this down onto our base plates. Rotate that. All right, that's working well so far. It looks like it's perforating here well, but it's not perforating here. So if I switch back to local orientation, I get these little squares, so I can actually widen this a little bit so it's attaching everywhere. I'm going to move this outward, slightly close it. So at this point, what I need to make sure is this is parallel to my incisive papilla and hamular notches. So hamular notches are here, incisive papilla is here. If I move this forward, is it perforating to the incisive papilla? Good. If I move this back, how does it look on the hamular notches? Well, it looks like the rotation is slightly off. So I need to drop this down just a little bit more and do the right rotation. Now I'm going to go up a little bit on the front. Okay, that looks good. So at this point, I'm mimicking the hip plane. I got perforation through. So it's like make it less perforated. So now I got attachments all the way throughout here. Move it forward just a little bit. Looks like it's not perforating anything, but it's within the file. Okay. So if I turn this on, it should be parallel to the lower, which it is, and it should have enough distance for the screw to be adjusted up and down for vertical dimension. Okay. So it looks good. Sorry, this wrong one. There we go. So now all I have to do is actually connect the base plate with this, right? So I'm going to select the base plate, hold shift, and then select the actual tracing plate. And we're going to do Boolean union. It looks like we have an error somewhere. So we're going to press cancel. And I can see that it's slightly perforating here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a sculpting tool, and I'm going to go into smoothing, click on that once, and that should erase that little perforation. And we're going to try this again. Sorry, not this one. This one. Let's see if that works. It worked just fine. Okay, excellent. Press accept. And now we have two files. We have the file for the upper with the tracing plate, and we have the file for the lower with the tracer. Okay, and all we have to do from here is actually print this and this, and also print the file for the screw. And that's how I do the Gothic arch tracers. So not as easy as it might be from the start if you never used Mesh Mixer before. But after you do a couple of them, honestly, guys, it's not that horribly complicated. Okay, it works out really, really well. And I can do one for every patient because I don't have to buy those kits. Everything's printable. Okay, so that's how you do the Gothic arch tracer. So let's say we've done the Gothic arch tracer, we've set everything up, we've not set everything up, we've mounted everything, or we've scanned it in. A lot of times we'll do a digital setup for some cases, or a combination digital analog. And let me talk to you a little bit about that and how I do that on the computer. So let's close this for now. I don't need to export this because this is just for the things. But if you wanted to export, what you basically do is you go into File, you go to Export, you type it in, and make sure you don't make the same mistake that I did. You see how it says STL binary format? That's what I usually have selected. But there's a way to change from that to STL ASCI2 SCI format. If you do that, guys, the file size is going to be huge. Okay, so don't do that because it will make your life a lot harder down the line. Okay, so always save an STL binary format. We're not saving it, so we're just going to cancel it. We're going to close this. Okay, Mesh Mixer, just like Metalink, is absolutely free, which just makes it really great. But I'm going to show you in 3Shape how to fabricate a digital setup. Now, the great thing about VITA digital system, it allows you to have several different options. Some of them you have to buy, some of them they're actually free. So you can do a monoblock setup. With monoblock, it's pretty much just a denture where the teeth and the gingiva are all attached together. You can also do printed base plates or milled base plates with carded teeth, which would look something like, where's that box right here? Which will look something like this, where the base plate is printed or milled and the teeth are carded, and you place them in there. This works well if you have enough room for the teeth so they don't perforate the base plate like they are right here, and you can bond them really well, no problems. However, if you have limited vertical dimension and the teeth will perforate the base plate, you can't use that method. The method that I utilize in those cases, one of two things. The one I use is where I print the base plates, and then I'll actually put the teeth in with wax, and I'll adjust the intaglio surface, and I'll do a try-in, and then I'll process it as a regular denture. Okay? Or there's a new option now where you can actually mill the teeth and mill the base plate, or print the teeth and print the base plate. But that option, you actually have to buy that library. Because if you just try to do it on here and try to do it as monoblock, it will actually create an error. Because I tried that and it worked for me. But the one I mostly utilize is where I do the base plates and the carded teeth, and I'll just adjust the surface. So basically, what you do is you click on the single tooth, you go from second molar to second molar. So click on one tooth, press shift and hold on the other one. That highlights the entire area. And then you do the same thing on the lower. And on an anatomy, I'll use the artificial tooth type, but instead of zircon, now you could use the VITA wax artificial teeth and base, but I don't like the confusion, so I'll just use the model material. My go-to is always model material because it throws the least amount of errors. Because like the one that's not, doesn't create too many issues. But some of these, if you choose model material, it will not give you the ability to generate the cam output, but I have the option enabled on my dongle where I have the visualization output, so I can output it no problem. Okay, so do model material for that, and for gingiva, I'll do click on the monoblock, switch over to model material again, but here from the monoblock, I'll switch to base with artificial teeth manual reduction. So base will have the perforations if it needs to be, and I can adjust the teeth manually. Okay, and I don't bridge teeth because I won't be able to adjust those teeth anyways because they're carded teeth, so I don't need that option. But if you're designing teeth yourself that you're going to be printing or you're going to be milling, you want to bridge those teeth, and then you usually will switch to base with design teeth. Hope that makes sense. Okay, there's also an option to do milled reduction. Those are usually the teeth come in blocks, and you can stick them into the mill. I think our gearbox does that, and you can actually adjust those teeth on the mill. Okay, but for us, we're going to do manual reduction. Okay, I'm going to press OK because we're actually going to be importing our scans instead of scanning it in, and we're going to go import scan, and it's asking for the lower jaw, which is right here. It's asking me for the upper jaw, which is right here, and it's asking me for wax rim. Now my wax rim file that I saved on the wrong format, like I showed you guys, and because of that, you see how it's taking too long to bring that in is because the file size is huge, but it works. Okay, once we do that, it's all scanned in. We're going to click next. Now it's going to open up the designer. Okay, and my wax rim in this case is just a duplicate denture. Okay, so it's asking me to define 3 points to define the occlusal plane. I just kind of will define it like this. Okay, now these sliders right here, I can reduce that, and by bringing this back and forth, I can actually adjust the slide, adjust my occlusal plane and my midline to match what I have right here. Okay, then I will click next. Next step is model analysis, guys. That's what you have to know, model analysis, to do this stuff. So I will actually I actually don't need the wax rim at this point. And it's asking me for tuberosity 1, which is right here, incisive papilla, which is right here, tuberosity 2, and it's asking me for K9.1 and K9.2. Now, if I have something like this, I can do that. But if I have just a regular wax rim and the K9 lines are not marked, what you basically will do is use the first major pair of palatal rugae and use that for your K9 position. So now it's going to the lower. It's asking me retromolar pet center, retromolar buccal, retromolar lingual, central ridge point, and same thing here, center, buccal, and lingual. And it's asking me for K9.1 and K9.2 points, right? So we know from model analysis, the position of the first premolar is usually right behind the buccal frena, okay? So the position of K9 is going to be slightly ahead of the buccal frena. So same thing here, where the ridge turns, that's usually where the K9 points are. So if you don't have visible buccal frena, look at the ridge form where it starts to turn. That's usually where the K9 is going to be placed. So now we're going to do next, and it's asking me to do the outlines for my bases, right? So I'll do the same thing like I did with the base plates before. I'm just going quickly and not really caring about too many things here because this is not a real case. If it was a real case, I would be just a little bit more careful. Not too careful because I would have to adjust it once it's printed anyways. Okay, there's this. Click next. And we can do the same thing with lower. Click on the outline option. It turns into a pencil. And we go into the things a little bit better. All right, click next. So now we've done the outlines, we've done model analysis. Now it's asking me for the block out. Now, if I'm doing a try-in, which I usually do, I want to make sure that it's blocked out properly. But if I'm going like an immediate denture, for example, then I will probably just not block out any undercuts and just process as is. Or you can block them out if you want to make for easier insertion. But just like with base plate, I'm going to change the orientation set from view for the upper and click next. And the next thing we're going to do is check for any black triangles. I don't have any, so I don't need to add any wax. Same thing for the lower. I don't need to add any wax here. Set from view. Actually, nope, sorry. Reset it. Because I don't change orientation on lowers usually. But if I wanted to, like for example, I can do this and set it from view. All right. Click next. Now I have a black little spot here. I'm going to adjust to make sure it doesn't cause any problems down the line. Now it's going to a smile composer, guys. And on this one, I'm using VITA. It's giving me option for ovoid. We'll just stick with the ovoid. And now we have a couple of different setups. I can do a buccal setup, I can do a lingual setup, or I can do lingual according to Gerber. Generally, I will do also a crossbite setup as well. But generally, I won't do buccal, I'll do lingual setup. And there's options on lingual. You can do lingualized curved, which is super ugly. You can do lingualized straight, that's the one that I used. Or you can do the Dutch one. So the Dutch one took me a while to figure this out, but the Dutch one, you know how lingualized you have your buccal cusp higher than the palatal one? Well, with Dutch one, it actually evens it out. So it's kind of like semi-anatomic setup, almost. Well, semi-anatomic is slightly different. But the one I usually do is straight, okay? And then we click apply. Okay, once we apply it, takes a little bit of time. It will render those teeth, right? Now, if you know your model analysis, you know that the teeth don't need to be going up this slope, right? Once it starts sloping up, you don't want to be putting any teeth there. So if I switch over, so with this one, we can move the whole arch. And if I look at my wax rim, I know that my teeth are behind where they need to be. So I'm actually going to move them forward right here, and I'm going to lower them as well. Okay, right about here. Okay, and also on that old setup, I actually have one premolar missing. But here, I'm actually going to do something different. I'm going to remove my second molars. And to do that, I'm going to click on here. I'm going to right-click on this tooth, and it says remove all the second molars, or I can just remove one tooth at a time. So I'm going to remove all the second molars. Now, today I'm not going to show you how to move each tooth individually, guys, because it just takes too long. And there are other courses on that kind of stuff. And actually, if you guys are going to be going to the Denturist convention in Vegas in September, I'll have my laptop and I'll have my 3Shape with me, and I can show you all those little things there because we have a lot more time there. But I'm just going to show you the basic steps of how to move forward from here. So I'm going to click next because we have about close to 10 minutes left, and I want to answer some questions down the line as well. So this error comes up every single time. It's like there's nothing I can do about it. I just click yes and go forward. I mean, I'm sure there's ways to fix it, but I just don't know those ways. And here we have some options of gingival contours. We can do individual custom settings if we wanted to, or we can use the presets. Usually the base thickness is at 2 millimeters on me. That's how I like to keep it. It works out well for me. And I'll just go click next. So it'll give me the outline where I need to be. Might take a little bit of time. These next steps take a little bit of time, guys, because it uses a lot of resources on the computer. Plus, we're running, software to do the video and everything else, so it's a little bit tasking on it. I have a really good computer here set up, but yeah, these teeth are obviously way too high. But just for the sake of fabrication, it works really well because the plane of occlusion set on this on these models is not the right way. They need to be lower. But I did it this way because it makes it a lot easier to do setups for classes because you don't have to sit there and grind on teeth for 2 hours. And because we usually do these courses like in a hotel or somewhere else, and it's just we don't have the right equipment to do that. So generally the upper and generally the lower. I can sculpt the denture base if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to pre-manufacturing. I can do drill compensations, and I can adjust the glue space. Now, if I'm doing printed, I like to keep the glue space at about 0.25, about 200 microns. Just because I'm going to be attaching it with wax for try-in. If I click next, it's going to do the same option for the mandible. Now these teeth are the carded teeth, right? So basically you buy the Vigo teeth, they will exactly mimic this library, and you are able to put those into those sockets. Now, if you have enough room, like we did on the lower, for example, you can mill that base, and you can use Vigo bond to bond those, and you're done. That's your final denture. Some people like to do a printed and bonded to that. That's fine. I'm just not the guy that does that. But here also same thing. So I'm going to click next. Same thing. I'm not going to do any kind of adjustments, and just moving forward. Let's see how this will render. Hopefully no errors. Now this setup in class 2, originally, because it looks at all the anatomical landmarks and tells me, like, you want the teeth to be on top of the ridge. You don't want things going too far forward. But I could fix that a little bit if I wanted to down the line. I can individually rotate these teeth slightly forward till they're to the depth of the vestibule and be okay. And then I could just move the occlusion a little bit. And you can also check for your protrusive and laterotrusive movements with an articulator when you're doing a setup. That's what pretty much looks like when you do it. So when you close it, all you have to do is you have to generate the cam output under advanced option, or you can export visualization output if you have that enabled in your dongle. So it looks good. So all I do, minimize it, go to manufacturing directory. If we go right here, we can see that we have a couple options. We have the monoblock, which we can print that as a try-in option. Okay. And we have the print, which is the base plates. Now you won't have anything for the teeth because what? Because the teeth are carded, right? So you just use the carded teeth and you put it in there. So I'll just put those carded teeth in there, attach them with wax, and send it in for try-in. When you do a reset, also really easy. Move some stuff around, print another base plate, stick those teeth in, and be good with it. Now, if it's looking like this, I can print that base plate or I can mill this base plate and attach those teeth in there permanently. So it works really well. But on the upper, same thing. We had monoblock, and we had what? We have something like this. Now, when you have something like this, when you're going to put the teeth into this, the teeth are going to be showing through the base plate. Now, obviously, you can't do this option for final. But what I basically will do is I'll put the tooth in, attach it with wax, and on an untangled surface, I'll take a burr and I'll cut the tooth till it's no longer interfering with the base plate and send it for try-in. And for me, I'll usually just process it as a regular denture, and it works out great. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today, and hopefully that was enough. And we still have about 5 minutes left for some questions, so we're doing great on time, I think.
We have videotaped today's webinar. So if you want to visit us at the VITA North America website, you can review this recording of the webinar, today's information. We also will redirect all the CE to you as soon as we process everything. And then we will have some additional support for you. I'll give you Eugene's information here in a second. If you need to get a hold of us, here is some information for the video. We have additional programs. Eugene is also doing another one. I think it's November 5th is for the denture again, and doing all sorts of other webinars. So thank you, Eugene.
My pleasure.
And then Eugene, like I said, Eugene's been good enough to provide you with his contact information. So if you need to follow up with anything from the videos when you visit it, we've got a lot of videos from Eugene for the last couple of years, all sorts of different topics of removable, fixed, dentures, implant stuff, printing, traditional, so everything. But if you have any questions, here is his information. As far as questions we may have, so let's get to the questions, and let's see what we have here. So we will start with, what do we got here? In non-digital processing method, which material is good to block the undercut in the models? So block out material for model work.
For just regular stone models, I use wax.
Just regular wax. Okay.
Base plate wax, yeah. But I'm not good at it. I'll be honest with you. I tried to do digital base plates and custom trays because it just it fits great every single time. Unless you have a bad resin that you're using, like maybe not a very high quality resin, it shrinks and it can kind of jam up on you, and you might have to adjust it manually. Like I use two types of resins for bases. I'll use the orange looking one. That's the one from Dentona. That one is a lot cheaper than the rest of the resin. I think I pay like $160 a kilo for that. But number one, it's FDA approved, so I can use it intraorally, which is great. The downside, it's orange, which is not amazing. And it slightly shrinks more than other resins, so a lot of times I'll have to adjust it a little bit to get it to fit on the model as well.
Okay. And then, do you know?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Do they still make the scannable stone?
Pretty much all stone is scannable.
Yeah.
You don't. I haven't had to spray any stone. It's the shiny stuff that's usually a problem. But the second resin that I use for base plates, the pink ones, is the Pacdent denture base. And I generally don't try not to use that because it's more expensive. And the only time I start using it is when it's about to expire and I want to use it all up. But the great thing is the fit of that stuff is amazing. So when I'm doing like cages for implants or I'm doing base plates, it fits perfectly every single time.
All right. Another question here is when there is excessive overlap on the anteriors, the patient must open their jaw more to go into protrusion. How can the technician ensure slight contact on posteriors in this circumstance?
That might be a problem, guys. I mean, because in those type of cases where you have a severe class 2 with a deep overbite like I do, when I go on protrusive in my real life, nothing's touching in the back. So you might not be able to achieve that balance. I'll be honest with you. If it's deep enough to, you're just gonna deal with what you have. Short of doing like surgeries and bringing the mandible forward and ortho and everything else, I don't think that's going to be fixing your
Yep.
issues.
We're not always perfect.
No, no. Well, I tell my wife I'm perfect, but she doesn't believe me.
Every patient, every printed denture that a patient has brought in to be worked on in the last time, it has been a nightmare. Constantly breaking, constantly losing teeth. What resin do you suggest? But I'm not sure that
I
that's
have
a
been,
issue.
so I might not be the best guy for this because the dentures that I fabricate that are printed are temporary. I don't do permanent printed dentures for that precise reason. Because there's been a lot of resins out there that are not high quality and a lot of staining has been happening with them as well. These resins that I use now, they're from Pacdent, the Rodin resins. I've had good results with those on a temporary basis. Now, I have had staining as well, but the staining I've had because we do prototypes and those are screwed in intraorally and we glaze them, so that could be part of that as well because they're intraoral all the time and they can't clean them as well. But try the Pacdent stuff. I just full disclosure, I am a KOL for Pacdent, so I do have a vested interest. But at the same time, I'm also KOL for VITA, and the reason why I'm KOL for all these companies, right, like VITA and Pacdent and Renford, is because I use those products every day and they work for me. Because I'm first and foremost, I'm a denturist, and my allegiances are to my patients. So I try to use materials that are great for my patients, and with those, I kind of have found out have been working well for me.
All right. There. Just thank you very much, Eugene. Got a little bit of that. We've got also. Um, let's see. Do you always drop the second molar, or is there a circumstance where you drop something else? Always the
Actually,
second.
most of the times I will drop second premolar because what I try to do is give the patients the most amount of occlusion surface to work with. So if my model analysis allows for it, so if my sloping goes up quite a bit further, I'll drop a first premolar. But if it slopes fairly quickly, and if I drop a first premolar, I'm still going to be too long, I'll drop the second molar.
Okay. Questions were, where do you get the screws for your Gothic arch?
So when I don't use the metal ones anymore. I print mine. So
Okay.
if you guys scan that QR code, there's a link in that QR code to a Thingiverse, a website, and under the gnathometer or Gothic Arch Tracer, it's got several names. They will have all those files in there for you guys to download.
All right. And then let's see. Oh, the mesh mixer. You said it was free. Where do you download that at?
Just Google Mesh Mixer.
Okay.
It'll give you the thing. The link.
And any last minute questions anybody has? Otherwise, we will. Looks like we're gonna be close to calling it a day. The half hour passed. So, uh, Eugene, I think you got the next one November 5th. I think we talked, and then you
But I'll
got
also be at the Dentures Symposium in Vegas in October,
Vegas.
beginning of
Yeah.
October. So for all my Dentures friends that are going to be there, please come and see me. I will show you everything I know about 3Shape and all the mistakes that I make using that software.
Excellent. Yeah, everyone likes to see your mistakes. So
Yeah. Well, it makes you human, right? When you're doing courses and you're like, everything's always perfect. I never make any mistakes. All my dentures are great. I get suction every single set. Everybody knows you're lying.
Yeah.
I probably screwed up more cases in my lifetime that I than I want to admit.
Yeah, it's real world results, right? I mean, not everything's perfect, like we said earlier. Any last minute comments before we let everyone go for the day?
Guys, just please. When I generally teach courses, I am not expecting you to follow every single step like I do. Everybody's different. Every technician is different. For some of you, the things that I do are not going to work. But if I'm able to give you just a little bit to kind of extrapolate on, that's great because we all build our own ways. And please, share your experiences with other people. If we all kind of collectively put our minds together, we can achieve some good things.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Eugene, again for taking a couple hours out of your time, out of your day. I know you're quite busy. Um,
I got like 17 missed phone calls.
and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Been an excellent program. I think we did well with the part one, part two. We'll probably do it again. So any of you that are online, if you have any suggestions on what we could maybe have as themes for next webinars with Eugene or anyone else, please give us a holler at the marketing, VITA marketing department, and we will try to put something together specific to what your needs are. So with that said, I'm going to let everyone go, and this will conclude today's webinar. Thank you again, Eugene. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.